handed out a bunch of stats that created a stir in Destin that showed there's a rigor here that is unique. In the SEC, we're not lacking for quality competition among our 16 football teams. But we're going to continue to evaluate whether increasing the number of conference football games is appropriate for us. And as I've said repeatedly, understanding how the CFP will evaluate strength of schedule and even strength of record is critically important in our decision making. As I conclude, as I mentioned within my remarks, we're living through a transformational moment across college sports. In fact, if you take a step back and go look at the iterative change over time, I don't think there's been a time in the last 100 years where so much change is in front of the college athletics enterprise as exists right now. It's actually amazing and exciting to consider the importance of the time during which we lead and serve. Let me be clear, from my perspective, college athletics is not broken. College athletics is not broken. It is under stress. It is strained. And the answers we seek are tied into the complexities that have been referenced over time. I went back and read my remarks from this podium or others over the last few years and pretty consistently have identified the challenges ahead with some of the decisions that we may have to make. I don't think the answers come from courtrooms completely. They don't come from commentators or commentary. They don't come from those outside sudden experts with their newest idea. Those of us in higher education embedded in college athletics know the intricacies of what's in front of us. And we all have to continue to adapt and have adapted as we seek to provide life-impacting opportunities and lifelong memories for young people across our nation. As we watch the college football landscape change around the Southeastern Conference, we remain both proud of what we've achieved and excited about our future. That future is not something we wait for, it is something we seek to shape. And we look forward to the year ahead with new opportunities, with new challenges, with certainly a set of new frustrations, with new faces, new results, and new hope. Before we engage in our usual tradition of questions and me deciding whether I provide answers, I'd like us to take just a moment and reflect back. We have a place here for Bob Holt. Bob would usually be the first question asker in the room. He lost a little bit of quickness over time, but also those I mentioned a moment ago and those in some of the bigger tragedies around our country. Okay, Kevin.
Thank you, Commissioner. If you do have a question, please raise your hand. We have Emma, Annie, and Nathan. We'll get a microphone to you. If you'd please stand if you're able, give your name and affiliation, and we have time for a few questions. So, Commissioner, we'll start over here on our left on the aisle.
Yeah, Brooks Austin with the On SI Network. Coach, or Commissioner, every time
it's good practice.
Yeah, every time I hear one of these coaches talk about the House versus NCAA settlement, they refer to listening to the advice of their lawyers and their administrators. I'm curious if you guys have any meetings as a league to help your teams kind of see this course or to continue your metaphor on this marathon.
Yeah, we have water breaks, if you will, along the marathon course, if those are meetings. We provided updates leading into decisions, and the difficulty for us is you cannot implement a settlement until there is a settlement. I've used a subgroup of coaches. We actually sent a note out to gather our coaches for another educational setting next week. We had video conferences with athletics directors, presidents, and chancellors last week. When I was here for the college football playoff national championship game in Atlanta, I was kind of lonely because I didn't have a team, but spent well over an hour on a video conference with our women's basketball coaches. We've done the same with our men's basketball coaches, and we use our meeting cycle regularly. The fact that change was coming, I think, was well presented. The elements of the change that would be central to a settlement, I think that was well presented. It is the intricacies of implementation where we are running rapidly in the midst of the race to make sure we provide the most relevant and most current information. And some of that's kind of time-bound by working through a process with the plaintiffs and with the court.
Commissioner, we'll go in the center aisle. Pat?
Pat Forty from Sports Illustrated. First, Greg, I appreciate the remembrance of Bob Holt. Well done. Secondly, the clear public disagreement between the College Sports Commission and the collective association about what the rules seem to be. Do you have an opinion on that, or how are we going to rectify that?
Well, we from the College Sports Commission think that we're operating consistent with the settlement terms. We'll have the right kind of communication with the authors of the letter and communicate and educate on why we think we had the right perspective to begin with.
Hey, Commissioner, we'll go over to our right-hand side on the far aisle.
Hello, Greg. David Cloniger with the Charleston Post and Courier. When do you anticipate having the format of the 2026 football schedule finalized?
First of all, I spent a long weekend in Charleston a few weeks ago, and it was my first time to walk around downtown, visit Fort Sumter, played Bulls Bay, and experience Folly Beach. So I didn't buy a newspaper while I was there. That was my 4 days away, so I owe you. I've been careful about giving dates. I've said repeatedly, I learned during COVID that you want to use your time. It won't linger terribly much longer. We have to make decisions about the 26th season and adjust if we're going to go to 9 games and there have to be games removed or rescheduled. And if we stay at 8, probably a little bit easier on that part of the logistics. Once we make a decision in the conference office, we're pretty ready to go. If you go back to when we made our last decision, we were in Destin. I think 2 weeks later, had opponents out. And shortly thereafter, we were prepared with dates and sites, sort of thing.
Okay, we'll go back here in the center section.
Mike Griffith, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Dog Nation. Commissioner, you've talked about the differences in the playoff models, and a lot of people have speculated on what's best for college football. When you talk about best, what would be some of the bullet points that you want to get out of the ideal college football playoff format should it expand to 16 teams?
Well, you're binding me to a 16-team playoff, but I'm going to, Mike, walk you back. So I'm on record of participating in a decision process that 12 was the right direction. And that took years, plenty of ups and downs. As I said, the middle is messy. In a marathon, it was messy. In that consideration, I think it worked well. I think some of the changes happening around us that may create some competitive balance raise the question of expanding. I've always been a fan of there are no allocations. Like, take the top 8 back in 2019 when people were talking about expanding. Take the top 12. I was an advocate for that. In fact, went back through with colleagues this spring. I could take the top 14, top 16. We have agreed, and I think last week there was some misunderstanding communicated about a memorandum of understanding. So in that memorandum of understanding, the top 5 conference champions have a role. So that's, unless you're going to go tear up the MOU, which maybe some other people want to do because of their concerns about the decision-making authority, that very clearly in that memorandum of understanding is granted to the combination of the SEC and Big Ten. Ultimately, we have to use that authority with great wisdom and discretion. But unless people want to tear it up, we're going to have 5+7, 5+9, 5+11. As I understand, doubling down, so that was one of the phrases last week. That's part of a gambling experience, as I understand. And you always want to have a really good set of cards. You want to have a good hand to play, right? And I think we have the best hand to play. So we're going to operate consistent with the MOU. There's an allocation of those 5 spots. And I guess we'll continue to debate whether expansion beyond 12 is appropriate for the college football playoff.
Okay, we have time for a few more. We'll start in front of me, Commissioner Tom.
Hey, Greg. Tom Murphy, Arkansas Democrat Gazette, and I also appreciate the tribute to Bob. When the format for 2026 is set, do you anticipate, could it possibly be another 2-year fix, or would you like it to be longer term? And does either side have momentum right now?
I generally like to get out of the football scheduling decision questions, right? So that suggests a longer term would be better. One of our learning experiences from our expansion to 14, and we had 2 years and then 12 years, and our discussion now is perhaps look-ins every so often would be wise. So while you might want to answer it once and for all, I do think there's an expectation that we'll at least have look-in opportunities should the schedule change.
Okay, we'll go over here to our right. Kirk.
Kirk Bowles from the Houston Chronicle. Greg, given the long history of revenue sharing, now that we're like 2 weeks in, what's been the early reports from your members as far as any concerns, complaints, or consensus?
There's consensus about concerns and complaints. How's that? Yeah, it's anything new is going to create questions. It's not constant and overwhelming from all 16, but it's a continuing process. And I think the freak out factor is a little bit high, if you will. In other words, somebody writes something and people freak out. That doesn't mean it's accurate. All the cautions about, hey, you know, the Twitterverse isn't maybe the best resource all the time for information, or Xverse as it's known. There's a great deal of trust that we've built with our members, and so we can walk through questions where we don't have answers. We'll go seek those. Keep in mind that we're still in the process of implementing policies, and that's defined in the settlement with the plaintiffs and potentially the court oversight. So there's a process to be involved. I do think it's a reminder of the importance of continuing communication. And as I indicated in another answer, we'll keep adding points of communication as we go through this change. It's one of those, again, COVID lessons that you have to change your operating rhythm. So maybe rather than quarterly meetings, you're in monthly meetings. Rather than monthly meetings, you're in bi-weekly meetings to either give an option for questions or conversation or provide information.
Okay, we'll go right over here on the second row, St. Marion. Second row.
Morning, Commissioner. George Somerville, Touchdown in the United Kingdom. I listened with some interest to what Commissioner Yormark and Scott Draper said last week in Frisco about developing their brand internationally. They went as far to say that they were looking at playing multiple games, not just in Dublin, but outside, in more than one sport. As the revenue, increases in growth and revenue become more and more important to the conference, we've talked about this before, what are your views on the SEC expanding the brand internationally?
George, I'll go back and share some thoughts I've probably shared over time. One is the strength of this conference is based in our communities. That may not be the same for others, but you look at the 16 cities that host our universities, the football stadiums, the infrastructure, and what happens on a game day weekend. It's absolutely magnificent, second to none. With that said, this may build some of my credibility with you. I sat once with the Lord Mayor of Dublin to talk about playing football games involving SEC teams. We've had interest. When you take a football stadium with 100,000 fans and the economics around that football game being played in that stadium in that community, and then you transfer those someplace else, it's a lot easier to do that if a program's attendance is 20, 30,000 of their football stadiums that size. So there are some economic realities that weigh against just doing that. Personally, I'd welcome that chance, and we'll continue to explore opportunities. But I'll go back to the importance of college football in our region, in our states, and in our communities, and the foundation and strength of our conference fundamentally is built on those communities. I also think we do a pretty good job internationally on our own with just drawing interest, because doggone, it's compelling. We are not boring and dull, I can tell you that.